Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is a speculative fiction, mystery, and thriller author, having written numerous series of novels as well as standalone novels and short stories. His name is Stuart Jaffe, and my interview with Stuart will follow the note-taking sounds. Stuart Jaffe, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Stuart Jaffe. I've been an author for over 30 years. I've written getting close to 70 books now. I'm best known as the author of the Max Porter Paranormal Mystery series, which has 19 books out at this point. But I write a wide variety of fantasy and science fiction, everything from contemporary action thriller fantasy to good old high fantasy and everything in between, including science fiction.
You have written a ton of books, and most of them are in your various series. And I'll start with the four of your series that are kind of featured prominently on your website. Without spoiling too much of the Max Porter, Nathan K., Parallel Society, and Ridnight Mysteries series, what are each of those four series about?
Well, sure. Like I said, I'm best known for Max Porter, so I'll start with that one. Max Porter is about a husband and wife who moved down to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and they discover his office is haunted by the ghost of a 1940s detective. So they do what anyone in that situation would do. They start a detective agency with a ghost, because what else can you do? And I take real history of the area, usually strange, odd history, and I mix it with witches, ghosts, curses, and magic. Nathan K. is an action thriller series with a fantasy twist. It's about a guy who can have two souls. So if he dies, he loses the one soul, the other kicks in, heals him up, and he's ready to go. If he loses his second soul, then he's dead. And as long as he keeps replenishing this, so he always has two souls, he's essentially immortal. And there are others out there like him. They're trying to control him for their nefarious purposes, and he's trying to break free of it all. And it kind of follows that whole what's going on with all that. And it is, like I said, it's a high action series. I often say it's John Wick with immortality. So that's that one. The Parallel Society is Max Porter is an ongoing series. The Nathan K., the storyline that you would begin with runs 13 books, and now the series is on is on hiatus, waiting to see if people want more. Because if they want more, I love that series. I'd love to write more, but the demand for that particular series seems to have found itself at about 13 books. The Parallel Society is complete at 7 books. So it's done, and there will be no more. It's a complete story. It is a contemporary fantasy. It's about a gal who works in her family bookstore and learns that grandma and grandma's two elderly friends have been saving the universe for decades and decades. And it's hard to keep it up with a bad back and arthritis, so they want her to take over, fighting all the monsters that fall in through rifts from other universes. And it's about her journey from, in book 1, saying, "No way in hell am I doing that," to, in book 7, "I'm a badass saving the universe." And then I'm trying to remember what the last one the Ridnight Mysteries. That's a trilogy, so it's complete at 3 books. And that one is a high fantasy and murder mystery or mystery mashup. It's kind of like what if Agatha Christie had tried her hands at writing Lord of the Rings knockoff. So we're following the same group of adventurers through 3 books that make a high fantasy epic trilogy, but each book is a unique mystery and a different mystery genre. So, for example, the first book is called The Waterblade, and it begins with a group of adventurers going off to kill the big bad when one of their teammates is murdered, and it could only have been done by one of their teammates. So another guy is brought in undercover, new guy, as the new member of the team, but he's really there to figure out who the murderer is, and that's the only skill he has. He's not a fighter, so he's stuck going on the quest with them because he's undercover and he's trying to not get killed with all this fantasy action that they have to go deal with, while he's figuring out which one of these people is the murderer. So there you go. There's four of the series, and I have more out there too.
Without spoiling too much of your Pathway Ring, Marshall Drummond, Malja Chronicles, Bluesman, and Gillian Boone series, what are each of those series about?
Well, so Marshall Drummond is in the Max Porter series, the ghost that they started detective agency is Marshall Drummond. So I couldn't write those. I still can't write those books fast enough. So to satiate all you wonderful but crazy readers, I started doing these short stories and novellas that feature Marshall Drummond back when he was alive in the 30s and 40s. And all the individual stories, I think there's 19 or 20 of them now. They're all out as individual stories on ebook. But then when I get 5 or 6 of them, enough to make a small book, I put them all together and release them in book form. So that's what that one is. The Malja Chronicles is a completed series at 6 books. It's post-apocalyptic fantasy where magic caused the apocalypse. If you think Xena meets Mad Max, that's what you're in for. The Pathway Ring is one of my newest. It is a series that follows a science fiction series that follows one family through multiple generations, and their family is at the center of the creation of the first ever Stargate in space. And then of course some of them and other people go through the Stargate and get spit out somewhere. And if they ever want to get home, they got to build the other end of it. So we're following them through all their loves and losses and family dramas, as well as political revolutions and all kinds of things that happen, first contact with aliens. And on the backdrop of all of this is them trying to actually complete the other half of the Pathway Ring so they can get home. What else?
Bluesman and Gillian Boone were the other two.
Gillian Boone. That's an interesting one. So that was originally going to that's a YA series about this girl who discovers that her and her family are at the center of protecting the world from all these weird aliens, but or not aliens, but weird creatures that are stuck on our world. And the thing is, I wrote this original. This is going back a ways when I wrote this, and I originally had planned it to be my second biggest series. I loved the idea, and I wrote the first book, which is A Glimpse of Her Soul. And this is going back a long ways. So blog tours were still a big thing, and so I did a blog tour, and all the blogs were like, "This is a great book," and every review was glowing about it. So I was really looking forward to how it would do, and it just tanked. Everybody who reads it loves it and leaves great reviews, but it just never has found its audience. So one of the joys of being, I'm a hybrid author, so this particular book I did as an indie thing. One of the joys of being indie is that I could write more if I wanted to, and as a gift to those people, one person in particular, but to all those who read it and really wanted more, I wrote the second book to just close out the story and give some closure. So the series is a complete duology, is what it is. So yeah.
What? Okay. Did you reference your Bluesman series in the?
Oh no! So sorry. The Bluesman. This is another interesting one. This is another spinoff, really, from the Malja Chronicles. In the literally opening paragraph of the Malja Chronicles, the first book is The Way of the Black Beast, and in it, Malja faces off against this assassin who looks like a 1930s Delta bluesman. And it turns out that in that world, the bluesmen are these assassin bards, essentially. They're assassins. They look like 1930s bluesmen, And when they play blues music, they can create magic spells. And throughout that entire 6 book series, they are villains. Now I play blues guitar myself. I taught myself to play guitar off the blues. I love the blues, which is why I put them in there. But I didn't really intend them to be villains. They just kind of came out that way. And so I decided I wanted to make one the hero. So I took one, threw him through a magic portal and dropped him here in our world right now. Had him team up with a college dropout, and they go through the South fighting all the monsters that fell into our world with him. And so it is 9 short stories that all together, kind of, if you read them in order, you get one big story. And that's what the Bluesman is at the moment. Although I have been working for quite a few years with a Eisner Award-winning artist named John Jennings. He's wants to produce a kind of, if you think of those nine short stories as season 1, we wanted to do season 2 of the Bluesman, and I wrote up the whole thing. I want to do it as a graphic novel. So I wrote up, originally it was going to be, I think, 7 or 8 issues, and then we would put them together as a graphic novel. And I learned how difficult it is to get an indie comic book project off the ground. It is crazy hard. We went through several artists who would start, and then there's so much work involved in putting together the art for such a project that they would end up leaving for either actual paid jobs or for whatever reasons. We finally we found an artist who we could work with and wanted to do the whole thing through. We completed the first one, and it was released through a small indie comic book press. That, as we were preparing the second issue, that press was I don't know if they've officially been bought out, but they've been in the process for over a year now, maybe going close to 2 years of selling off a lot of their properties to Dark Horse. And among those properties was the Bluesman. So we've been in limbo, unable to publish, and not knowing what's going on with Dark Horse for us. So we'll see. John and I are determined before we die to get this thing completed. We both really are passionate about it and would love to see it happen. It's all the business side stuff that keeps getting in the way at the moment, but we'll see what happens. So that's the Bluesman. But you can enjoy the first 9 short stories. Those are available everywhere. So it's just the comic book that is hard to find.
Without spoiling too much of your standalone novels and short stories, what are each of those about?
So the standalones, I have 3 standalones. 2 are science fiction and 1 is a fantasy. The 2 science fiction, we have After the Crash, which is about a woman who is a tourist pilot around a gas giant, and she ends up getting blackmailed / coerced into taking some aliens and a human scientist and landing them on a virgin planet that it's illegal to land on. And as the title of the book implies, that landing goes poorly. And so the book is part survival story on a wild planet, mixed with her trying to figure out why she got roped into this in the first place, what's really going on. The second standalone is called Founders. This is also science fiction, and it follows a group of people who go to colonize a new planet. The book begins several years after they've already been there, and they start getting clues that they may not be the first humans there, which is not possible. So what's going on? And then finally, the third standalone is called Real Magic, and this is a time travel fantasy. This follows a man who is a sleight of hand magician and a poker cheat. And he ends up going through a magic door to 1934, which is the year that modern sleight of hand magic was born from poker cheating, card cheating techniques. And it's the only skill he has. So he's got to use it to try and survive and hopefully get back to the present. And I wrote the book. But if you get the book, you'll see that there's a co-author credited. His name is Cameron Francis, and he's a renowned sleight of hand magician throughout the world. And we came up with the idea together, and he advised me on how all the tricks in the 1930s were done because we explained to you how they were done back then. And then he also designed a specific trick just for this book that you can experience. It's a self-working trick, so you can do it to yourself, and it's really neat. So that's the other standalone. And I have a ton of short stories. The first decade of my career was writing short stories, so I have tons and tons of them, and I've put them out in different collections. And I'm actually looking at doing a larger collection of everything that I've ever published or written and wanted to be published in terms of short stories. That might be coming out probably next year if it gets done. So we'll see.
Where does the inspiration for the characters of your stories come from?
So, I mean, the ideas for stories and characters can come from anywhere, really. And I often say that ideas are cheap, they're easy to find. For a professional writer, it's not a question of how do you get these ideas, but more likely how do you sift through all the ones you have to figure out what's good. And for me, and this is more explaining how I come up with a story in general, but this is true for character too. With a story, maybe I'll have an idea that I think is good, and it'll be sitting, but I can't connect it with anything into a full story, and so it'll be just sitting out there in my head. And then a year later, there'll be some other idea, and somewhere along the line, those two floating ideas might connect in my head, and I might realize, hey, those could work together and do something interesting. And best of all is if I have at least a third or fourth idea that I can smash in there, and then I have something really good going. And it's often the same with characters. The characters are often an amalgamation of different traits that I find interesting to go together. And then for the specific story, I always ask myself a question of like, what's the worst trait I could give this character? What's the trait I could give this character that will give them the most problems in this story? Because that's what makes a good story is conflicts, and character conflicts are much more interesting than just plain old plot conflicts. So, for example, if we were going to write a story right now about, I don't know, a plane that is going to crash and everybody on board knows it, and our hero is going to have to save the day. It would be great if that was his or her first flight, and they are so nervous about flying, and they hate the idea of leaving the ground, and any kind of fear like that is going to make things that much harder for them. So that would be a way to create a trait just based on what they would have to endure for the book.
Do you outline before writing the manuscript for each of your novels, or do you write without outlining beforehand?
I am very much an outliner. I I write 3 to 4 books a year, so I just don't have time to sit there looking at a blank screen and wondering what I'm going to do today. And will it work or will I have to go back and change things? I have everything outlined. I can look at what I'm going to do and I start writing. And if the inspiration hits me and things change, I have an outline to figure out how to get it back on track or what directions not to go in because I've worked all that stuff out already. My short stories, those I tend to just write as just without any plan, and we'll see where they go.
How are you able to write such a massive number of books, and what has your publishing journey been like?
So my sarcastic but honest answer to the first question is I'm just old. I've been writing, like I said, 30 years. And so if you're putting out 1 to 2 books a year for 30 years, you'll get yourself 60 books and it's just not that difficult. The journey is a much more difficult story. That I predate my writing career predates ebooks and indie publishing as a viable form of publishing. So I started writing. I'd been writing short stories on and off my whole life. Never actually sent anything out. And when I got out of college, I was curious if I just was curious if I could write a novel. I knew I could write short stories, and I knew that I could write a page in a day easily. I could find time throughout a day to write a page. That wouldn't be too hard. So I figured if I write a page a day for a year, at the end I'd have 365 pages, and hopefully they would be coherent and make a novel. And so I did that. And when I finished, I'd written my first novel. And it was, of course, a piece of junk. But I finished it. I climbed that mountain, and suddenly I started thinking about the next novel and then the next one. And by the time I'd written about seven, I'd gone through about seven novels. I'd finally gotten to a point where I was writing stuff that was publishable, and I knew that because by that point I sent stuff in to publishers and came very close to getting. Well, I, uh, I wasn't getting anywhere. Then I eventually got an agent, and again, this was pretty much the only way to get published back then was through a major publisher. Um, we had some very close calls to getting a major deal. The closest, I believe, was through back then. Warner Brothers had a publishing arm called Warner Aspect, which was their science fiction arm, and we had sent them after the crash, and they sent it back and basically said, "We love it and we would happily publish it, but 2 weeks earlier we had just we had just signed a contract to publish something similar about survival on a wild planet, and so they had to pass on." And but that was I mean, that was kind of the happiest rejection I could get because it at least told me I knew for a fact I was writing now at a professional level. And then I went on that merry-go-round with a agent and publishers for a while, where basically everybody Tor would come back and they'd say, "Wow, we love his book. We love his characters. We love his the writing. We love it all. We're not going to buy it." And so I'd write something else, and we'd send it over and over, all this love, but never getting across the finish line. And by this point, self-publishing through the Kindle had come out, and self-publishing had become viable for about a year. It had been around for about a year, and I was starting to think to myself, well, maybe this is just not going to happen for me. Maybe I need to go do something else with my life. But I had a decade's worth of short stories, and I thought, you know what? I'm just going to put those together in a book. The book is called 10 Bits of My Brain. I'll put it out and see what happens, see what all this self-publishing thing is about. Because clearly the major publishers, I'm just not getting over the finish line there. And so I put it out, and the first time I could identify a sale or the first time I made a sale of that book that I could not identify as my mom, my brother, or anybody that I knew, it was truly a stranger bought the book. I suddenly felt as giddy and excited about writing as I did when I first started. And at that point, I was like, I'm never publishing with traditional publishers again. I'm all indie all the way. And I was that way for probably the next, for many years, until I started to grow and build my audience. And I started realizing that there are ways I could use a publisher. I didn't need them to make me a pretty book, but I could use them as an advertising source to get hold of some of their audience that I'm not reaching. And so I ended up doing the Ridnight Mysteries through Falstaff Books. I've done other books like Founders I did through Silence in the Library Press. And then when that press folded, as often happens with small presses, I got my rights back and just published it myself. I've had talks before with major publishers, and those deals have yet to go through, not because of the book, but usually because of me not willing to take the pittance they want to give me for nothing in return. except maybe the promise that maybe your book will do more than be thrown at the wall to see if it sticks. So if I can get a better deal than that, I might do it. But at this point, that's kind of where I am.
One final question. What do you love most about living in North Carolina?
What do I love most? The spring and the fall. They're not the longest compared to some places. They used to be. I've lived here in North Carolina for over 20 years, and when we first moved here, when spring came in late March, early April, you'd open up your windows and they wouldn't have to close again until June. And then the same would happen in the fall. They would be open from from the end of September all the way through to like mid-December. It was just wonderful. As the world has warmed up, that's not so the case anymore. We still have absolutely gorgeous springs and falls, but they just don't last as long now. So here we are in the end of May, and the house is on air conditioning now because it gets just too hot. But during those time periods, I absolutely love the area. It's beautiful.
Stuart, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were a fascinating guest to interview.
Well, Aaron, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I always enjoy interviewing fiction authors, and it was amazing to interview Stuart. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2025, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.